All right, Claibs, welcome on in. It's another edition of the lunch show, Ameren, Illinois lunch show with Claibs and Joe. I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to make us go live on Instagram for the first time ever, as technology just keeps growing and growing with
It
this
does.
website and this show. And now that we're in 2024, everybody, as we bring you the first show of the new year. Claibs, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to 2024 for a lot of different reasons. A lot of things to talk about in the sports world. So I'm ready to go.
Well, we will. We have a lot of football to talk about here on the show today. Two games yesterday, a whole slate of games over the weekend in the NFL, and not a whole lot of baseball or really anything else outside of football as they dominate the headlines right now. Did you make it down? Were you down at the Cotton Bowl last week?
Stuck my head in the door.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I was there. I got to tell you something. That might have been it, other than the Rose Bowl, maybe one of the best attended bowl games we've had so far. Because if you look at a few of those games from yesterday, there were a lot of empty seats, especially in the games that took place earlier in the day. So the bowl situation is about to change for a lot of different reasons. But one of the things I've always concerned myself with is attendance in bowl games and also the NCAA tournament in the first round. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of those places are not full. And I don't know whether people have just decided, it's too expensive to travel. They don't have enough interest. And maybe they have a better TV than they do being at the game. And I'm one of those guys where, for me, I'd much rather stay at home and watch a game. I get more angles. I get more ideas on what's going on. Now, if you enjoy the environment, that's great. I mean, that Rose Bowl looked like that could have been a fun event until you go to the Rose Bowl. If you ever, I don't know if you've ever been there or not, it's a pretty cramped environment. I mean, this is a stadium that has not had major improvements to it in a long, long time. And it is not the most comfortable setup you'll be in.
The that's with the in regards to the Rose Bowl, in regards to still calling it the Rose Bowl, still having it at that 3 o'clock start time, that afternoon start time. One of the things I noticed yesterday, this kind of goes into the entire bowl season as a whole. They win the game yesterday. Michigan wins the game yesterday, and they're out there handing out Rose Bowl champion hats. If you're a player on that Michigan team, are you ever going to tell anybody later on, hey, remember when we beat Alabama in the Rose Bowl? Or are you telling people, hey, remember when we beat Alabama in the semifinals?
I think it's 6 in one and half dozen in the other. I mean,
I
the
think
Rose Bowl has that sort of importance to it. Semifinals, yeah, I guess, but I think I'm getting hail in the moment. So either way, I've won. So I don't really care what they call it.
it's just, I mean, we are, after this is done, after the game next Monday, we have moved on from this bowl season as we know it. We're going to 12 teams. Any of these games become even more relevant than they are right now. And I mean, it just seems like we are holding on for dear life just to have some historic value to these names, to calling it
Yeah.
the Sugar Bowl, the Rose Bowl, and especially in these situations. It didn't need to go down this way. I'm sure everybody still gets their money, still gets a large piece of that pie in the end, but just hanging on to it at the end, it does seem a little silly when
What would you
it gets
call
down
it?
to it. It's the college football semifinal game. It's one of the, I mean, what
Played
do
at
you
the
call?
Rose Bowl.
Oh yeah, played at the Rose Bowl. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Do
I
it that
mean,
way.
yeah, and I think most people look at it that way. I mean, let's face it, the Rose Bowl's been around a lot longer than the playoff system.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you probably hear people use that term Rose Bowl more than they do the semifinals.
Mm-hmm.
I want to touch on something you bring up with regard to the 12 teams. I don't think this 12 teams good enough to win the championship. I think the 12 team is just fodder.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that was. I really thought maybe 8 would have been a better way to go. Along with this, now how many games these kids going to play now? Is it 15?
With the new, I haven't seen what these schedules look like with all the conferences
So
expanding the way they are.
So you have a normal 12 game schedule, right?
Is that what? Okay.
So you throw in the playoff. of your conference championship. So that's 13. Uh, Now you play 2 rounds of football if you get a bye, and now you find yourself playing 15 games. Have we not learned anything that this game of football is not designed to be played this many weeks in a row or this many weekends? And the NFL is a classic example with regard to how many injuries that we continue to see because we play too much. And I know there's a lot of money at stake, but I don't blame one player for opting out. I wouldn't play.
Right now, as I'm looking through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So Mizzou has 12 games next year. That is on their schedule ending on November 30th. So that'll be, so that's their, so 12, 13 if they make the SEC championship game. And then, yeah, if you win that, you get the 2-round buys for that. But I agree with you as far as the 12 team go. You look at Liberty yesterday and what they did. Liberty would be that 12th team. Liberty would get that one of those bids for being the highest ranked non-power conference team, and they would get in there for that. I mean, it would essentially be like having another bye. You'd have to go out there and you'd have to play the 60 minutes, but you know you're going to beat that team. There's not a whole lot of situations where you're going to have Boise State, Oklahoma, like we saw way back in the day. But yeah, those teams don't belong, and it's a nice gesture to put them out there. It's more so for the teams like, looking at a team like Mizzou. How do you think Mizzou would have done if they would have faced the real Ohio State, the Ohio State that went through and played Michigan back in November? How would Mizzou have held up against them?
Good question. And I guess that's one of those things where it's decided on the field. Ohio State obviously missed some good players, but you know what? They still showed up, and they had to play the game. So, is it a situation where you lose a player because they opt out compared to a person that goes down and with an injury in practice or in a game? I mean, you had 4 weeks off, first of all. So
Yeah.
that's another thing. They need to tighten that gap a little bit because if it's me, if I'm a coach, I probably have a dozen plays, maybe 8, that I'm going to work on every day in practice. I'm going to take 15 minutes and work on a certain set of plays that when I come back to the bowl game after that 4-week layoff, I'm going to have a pretty different looking offense. And I may even have a different look defensively. Nothing has been seen. I'm not going to use it during the season. I've got my own bag of plays because, Joe, you've got 4 weeks to prepare. That's longer than what teams do when it comes to summer practice going into their first game of the season.
Yeah.
So, there's no excuse on not being able to tweak things. So I think you probably need to condense things a little bit more. And it's amazing that nobody ever talks about classroom time. The hell with that. I mean, we're out of school anyway, but there's a lot of classroom time that's being sacrificed at this time of the year also, especially when you get into November.
I mean, a lot of these kids, yeah, they had their finals early December, mid-December, and they haven't had to worry about anything since then. I think when you talk about playoffs and classroom time, I feel like that's more of an issue for when basketball season gets into March Madness.
Yeah.
With having to, and if you play March Madness, if you're going 3 weekends deep, plus the conference tournament the weekend before, you're essentially traveling and playing 3 games one weekend, 2 games, 2 games, 2 games. I think that might be a little more of a case for that. But with as big and as much money as these universities have today, everybody's getting tutors out on the road. Everybody, and with the way technology is too, these kids are taking classes on their computers. I think that's an older excuse that people might use for not having this expanded into the playoff that we're going to see next year.
That's a fair statement. You mentioned everybody's got money. I'm not sure if I agree with that because I'm reading and college admission is on the decline. Okay. So they're not rolling in as much dough. And I'm sure some schools are. I mean, we talk about Power 5 schools. I don't think Michigan or Ohio State or Alabama is going to be cut back on staff because of financial issues. But I think there are some programs and some conferences that have to make some decisions about how they're going to manage their budgets because, some of these schools don't get a dime from the university. Other schools rely on some sort of contribution. So it just depends. But you know what? I think we kind of saw this coming where, we're going to separate the men from the boys in this whole situation within the next couple of years anyway. So um, I'm anxious to see how the financial pendulum will swing.
Yeah, the outside of that, I mean, the Florida State Georgia game. I know when you saw it on paper, it looked like it was going to be exciting. The two teams that thought they deserved to be in were going to get a chance to play each other, but Florida State without their quarterback, and then 23 players opted out from Florida State. Is that what I think I heard? What I
It
read?
was a very large number.
You knew that game. I mean, yeah, some Georgia players opted out too, but Mike Norvell didn't stand a chance in that game.
Yeah, but I didn't think he could get beat by 60. I didn't think that.
23. I mean, that's your whole starting offense and defense when you.
but all those guys aren't starters,
right?
But here's a question for you: what are you going to do about this opt-out thing?
Nothing. You can't. I don't think there's any. What are you going to do?
But that lessens the game itself,
right?
Though. I mean, and maybe that's why we have a lot of empty seats. So people say, "I'm not going to watch the second stringers or guys who just walked on and started playing." And Ohio State's a good example.
I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr.
taking a snap.
Yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't opt out until hours before the game. He wanted it to be all about his teammates. He wanted everything leading up. He didn't want any questions about why he opted out, and he chose for the very last second to opt out of the game, even though I think a lot of people assume that he was going to opt out. So you can't punish these guys. You can't say, hey, if you have this many people opt out, we're not letting you in the game, or we're not going to play the game. You can't punish them financially. I mean, I don't think there's an answer to this at the end of the day.
I think what you may see down the road is, there's an incentive if you play. Maybe there's another big paycheck for you from an NIL fund.
Get the sponsors to load it up that way. Get the sponsors of these bowl games. Get Pop-Tarts and Cheez-Its to load up and write another check for the players on the winning side. Yeah.
But, here's the thing that I'm still scratching my head over with regard to NIL and in the money that's being generated from it. At some point, isn't that going to dry up? Because you already have your boosters who are sponsoring this and sponsoring that. Now you have to go out and find a whole new group of advertisers or contributors. I just don't know if the well is that deep to be able to hold that up for a while.
How much is CBS paying for the Big Ten next year?
Yeah, that's CBS paying the network.
Right.
The network is paying the conference. No. You missed my point. These individual schools have to be able to raise money for their own NIL. So if you mention Marvin Harrison Jr., CBS could give less. Well, CBS obviously has a stake in it. But my point being, the university has got to continue to find other revenue streams in order to suffice these players. And if you get the players getting into a bidding war on
Claibs, Claibs, I'm looking it up. I mean, you say that with the schools. I had to look up the exact number, but Texas A&M's paying Jimbo Fisher $76 million to not coach. Schools have money too.
No, they do. No, that's not my point. My point is, at some point, they're going to have to make some decisions on who gets what. Now, the Jimbo Fisher thing, that's very unique. Okay, I mean, we're seeing some coaches getting paid. I forgot what the number was. Some guys getting paid not to coach, but how often does that take place? And that's spread out over time. That's not like Jimbo Fisher's getting $87 million to stay at home this year. That's going to be spread out over the course of time. I just think that from a money standpoint, there's a lot of it there, but there's going to be a lot more needed in order to keep this thing afloat.
We need to talk about the two games that we saw yesterday and preview the national championship, which is taking place on Monday. Before we do that, though, let's take a quick break. This is the Ameren, Illinois Lunch Show with Claibs and Joe, powered by Ameren, Illinois, powered by Gray Bar, driven by Munganess St. Louis Acura.
Let me get this straight. Gray Bar is a distributor?
Yep. For more than 150 years, we supported electrical and datacom projects all over the country.
So you can get me products wherever and whenever I need them?
Yep. Thanks to our expansive national logistics network.
For any industry?
Yep. From construction sites and industrial plants to schools, hospitals, and just about everything in between.
So you could say Gray Bar is much more than a distributor?
Yep, you could say that.
They really do it all.
Yep. When you need a hand powering, connecting, or maintaining your operations, join the thousands of professionals who rely on Gray Bar to help keep them up and running. Yep, Gray Bar does that.
It's the Ameren, Illinois Lunch Show with Claibs and Joe, powered by Ameren, Illinois, powered by Gray Bar, driven by Munganast St. Louis Acura here on claibsonline.com. If you missed any of the first segment of the show, the podcast will be up later on this afternoon. Wherever you find your podcast, just search for Claibs Online and you'll see it right there. And as always, live streaming this show each and every week on the Claibs Online Facebook page, both of our Twitters, YouTube, and now, Claibs, I think I have it all figured out to where we are apparently also streaming live on Instagram too. So we're just all over the place, several different ways for you to find all of the content that we are putting out there on Claibs Online. So yesterday, Alabama, Michigan, and then Texas and Washington, both games that came down to the very end with two of the best semifinal games that you could have asked for yesterday between four very deserving teams in the that I think the committee showed that they got it right with picking these final four.
I couldn't agree with you more. It was truly entertaining from a lot of different angles. But I'm going to go back to something I preach on this podcast all the time about football. Line play is paramount. Okay. I don't care who your quarterback is. If you don't have people who can block and who can tackle, you have no chance. And I thought the way Alabama really was dominated by Michigan's defense and their defensive line said all you needed to know about that game. And Nick Saban made a great point about the fact we shot ourselves in the foot. Yeah, you did. There's no doubt about it. Michigan had a little help with you pulling the trigger on it. But bottom line is, if you don't have good, consistent line play, it's hard to beat anybody. And we saw it yesterday.
Yeah, it came down to overtime in that Alabama-Michigan game, and then the late game, the late game.
I think it's a good idea that they do it, on the same day. They might want to start one of these games a little earlier, man, because going into the night, man, it was really a struggle.
Yeah.
As entertaining as the game was, I think, between the eating and all the couch lounging and everything else, it could be a very long day.
But have you looked ahead to see what the schedules of the games are for next year? Like how they're doing them next year with the 12-team format in the tournament?
I have not seen that yet.
So
I'm anxious to see how it works.
They started in December. December 20th is the first game. It's going to be the on-campus first round. The first game is Friday evening. And then on Saturday, you're going early afternoon, late afternoon, and evening. That's going to be a long day of college football clock rules, watching those on a Saturday.
You're not going to go up against the NFL. I mean, they've always had that agreement. They're not going to go up against each other. I understand that. But, man, that's a lot of football in one day. And, you can get burnt out. I mean, especially – if you don't have a dog in a fight, like me, I'm an Alabama fan, but, if Alabama loses, I'm not going to jump off a cliff or anything. But I think when some of those folks who watch those sort of things, they kind of say to themselves, okay, I'm mentally exhausted from just one game. So I'm not sure where they go with it, but that's a lot of football.
It is, yeah. They do.
And it's not always going to be guaranteed as good as it was yesterday, too.
No, so next year though they are actually splitting up the semifinal games. So next year the semifinals like the games we got yesterday, it'll be Thursday, January 9th will be the game in Miami, the Orange Bowl, and then Friday, January 10th will be down in Dallas, the Cotton Bowl. So they are separating them into two nights, and then the teams don't play the national championship until January 20th. Next year. So you will actually get those two games split up on different nights moving forward for next year. So anyway, the game, the Texas Washington game, I think this is the one for as much as we followed and saw Michigan throughout the year, especially with all the controversy around Jim Harbaugh, and for everything Alabama related, being in the SEC, being prime time as much as they were throughout the year. Washington's one of those teams that kind of suffered from that West Coast late start times, not playing maybe the best quality of opponents every week. And then Texas seemed to just kind of fly under the radar, I think, most of the season too, being in a dwindling Big 12 conference. Was kind of falling apart as we saw the year go down. But Michael Penix Jr., for being a finalist in the Heisman this year, kind of putting his name on the map. I as well as he played, and as fun as he's going to be to watch on Monday night, I still don't think his draft stock really should have raised that much. But still, fun kid to watch play.
Well, his draft stock won't raise very much because he's had 2 ACLs.
And he's 24.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons why he's 24, he's still playing, because of the two ACLs and the transfer and everything else that comes with it.
COVID season, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? He's a serviceable player. I mean, I don't know if he's, I don't know if he's going to be sitting in the green room on draft night, being a first round pick. But you know what? There's a lot of good players that go after the first round to have themselves a pretty decent career in the National Football League. I think the red flag is going to be the knee issues that teams are going to look at. And therefore, he will slip in the draft because of that, not because of what he's done on the college scene. And I think sometimes we get caught up in what a guy does in one game, and all of a sudden he's got to go to the front of the class. And I go back to Vince Young. Vince Young was really good against USC one night in the Rose Bowl. And Vince Young parlayed that into a first-round draft selection. Vince Young never lived up to those expectations. And there's a lot of guys who have that one good night in January and find themselves struggling at the next level. And so, and I'm not saying that could be Penix, but it wouldn't surprise me.
What did what jumped out at you about that Washington team yesterday that maybe you haven't seen much of this year?
You know, that's a good question, because you touched on something earlier. We in the Midwest don't see as much of Washington. And I think the one reason why we saw more of them this year, A, they're a good team. B, I think the whole Colorado experience gave the Pac-12 a lot more exposure early in the season.
And Caleb Williams, all the hype around him at the start of the season too.
So now all of a sudden Washington and Oregon both dovetail on that notion, and we see a lot more of them. And maybe in earlier games. And you remember Deion Sanders complained about, the early start times for teams from the Pac-12 so they can get more national exposure. And I think it panned out for Washington. I think what I was most impressed with their offense is really quick strike. They have multiple ways they can beat you. They're really big up front, and they're tough up front. And I think that's been one of the things that really stood out for me, and why they could give Michigan a problem as well. Obviously, Michigan was good against Alabama, but I don't think Washington has fallen in this situation by mistake. They deserve to be in the championship game.
The number 1 and number 2 seeds both undefeated. It's next Monday down in Houston for the national championship. I haven't looked at the lines yet, but I'm going to imagine Michigan the favorite going into that one. I'm going to say by 5. That's what I'm going to say as I look up what the line is. What do you think?
I'm going to say 3.5.
4.5 for Michigan. So split the difference on the on the two of us with that. Who do you got in this one?
Maybe because I'm more familiar with Michigan, I would take them. I would take them, especially if they're healthy. They don't really their defense proved yesterday they can play with anybody. The offense, their offense is a concern to a point. I know their quarterback has done a really good job, but, I'm going to take Michigan just by a little bit, although I think Washington probably is a little bit more potent offensively.
We will take our final break. When we come back, Claibs, we'll talk a little NFL, and surprise, once again, we'll talk officiating in the in the NFL, as that seemed to headline most of Week 17. As we will be back here, it's the Ameren, Illinois Lunch Show with Claibs and Joe, powered by Gray Bar, driven by Munganast St. Louis Acura here on Claibs Online.
Are you ready for a challenging and rewarding career? There are quality jobs in the construction industry.
I got out of college and my career choices were very limited, and this provided me with a plan for the present and the future at the same time.
I actually have a bachelor's degree in psychology, and I was making less than I make as a first-year apprentice painter.
I didn't go to college. I have no college debt. I make more money than the majority of people I know that went to college.
Take your first step towards a rewarding career. Visit stlouispdf.org.
Back here, final few minutes of the Ameren, Illinois Lunch Show with Claibs and Joe. Next week, we should be broadcasting from one of our sponsors, Munganess St. Louis Acura, out there on Manchester. Claibs, it's our once-a-month visit to the folks out there at Munganess, and we'll talk all about them next week. But soon after that, you will be on your way down to Florida following the Cardinals winter warm-up. Once again, coming up, we're 2 weeks away from that?
Winter warm-up starts next weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Here in St. Louis, so everything will be over at Ballpark Village, and it was a pretty good setup that they had over there last year. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it unfolds. We'll be out on the road. The Cardinal broadcasters will be out on the road for our Cardinal Caravan, and we'll be touching in a lot of our markets that we've been involved with for a number of years. I think I'm on the Springfield run this year with Ricky Horton, and I'll look that up and tell you about who's going on our crew on our trip. And then we have the cruise the following week. So a lot going on in the month of January, and we hadn't had one round of catch played yet.
Claibs, I'm glad you mentioned Horton because I wanted to bring this up on the show today because I had a friend text me last week. I don't know what they saw Rick Horton in, if they saw him in a commercial or whatever, but they texted me and they asked me, they said, how nice of a guy is Rick Horton? That was the question asked to me, and I couldn't stop. I could not stop telling them how good of a guy he was, and I wanted you to also give your answer on that as well.
Well, you know what? Being around Ricky Horton as a player and as a broadcaster, I consider him one of my great friends, ultimate teammate, and we always find a way to amuse ourselves. And he's a genuine person. I think that's something that in this business of ours, you don't run across very often. I know his family. He knows my family, and we have a good time talking the game and just talking about other things in life, and when you're around people like him and John Rooney and Jim Jackson and Chip Carey and Brad Thompson, we're around each other a whole lot off the field. And he's truly become one of my good friends that I truly have come to appreciate, not just as a broadcaster, but as a person.
Claibs, you mentioned you were down at the Cotton Bowl. Howard on the call for Mizzou this past weekend, and I know Howard was sticking around to see Jimmy Johnson go into the Cowboys Ring of Honor on Saturday on the same field. Were you down there for that as well?
No, I was.
So you missed all. You could have stopped that. You could have went in there and fixed everything that went on in that game on Friday night.
You can't fix the NFL when it comes to officiating. And here's the problem that we have in sports. As good as the teams are, we don't have enough good officials. And you pick the sport. I mean, college football is awful. The NFL steps on themselves every week. And I understand that there are going to be mistakes made. That comes with the territory. There's no such thing as a perfect player, no such thing as a perfect official. But I think their mistakes are so glaring that you really have to show concern about how do you fix this. And along with the fact, how about if the NFL acknowledges that maybe there was a mistake made? I mean, you seldom, if ever, hear that. And you never have access to the individuals who were at fault or who are in question. Here's something else that we need to throw out on the table. And I tweeted it out last night. With the obsession and impact that gambling has on sports as a whole, somebody's going to get questioned about some concerning calls that are taking place. And there's a lot of ways. We had one guy in the NBA that got tagged for it, and I don't think he's the only one. And some of them do it because they may have an obsession. Some of them do it because of pressure, but they're doing it. And I think there's something that while the sports leagues do not want to make a bigger deal of this because then credibility comes into play. And if there's one thing gamblers need to have is the credibility of the teams and the institutions that they support by gambling.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have a bloody nose here pretty soon because at some point somebody's going to get caught or be accused, and the evidence is going to be overwhelming that either they're incompetent or they're on the tape.
So you have, so that was the big thing from Saturday night. And that's, the worst part about that is that's the only game on. That's the prime time.
Everybody sees it.
Only game on. Everybody's watching that. It was one of the best, most marquee matchups of the weekend. So it had all eyes on it, and the whole world was watching that game on Saturday.
But you know what, though? Here's the thing. And I know Dan Campbell mentioned it. Before every game, the officials come to the coach's room and they talk and they let them know, hey, look, we're going to run this play or be on the lookout when we want, in this situation, we're going to be looking to call timeout. And I mean, they go down a little checklist, different formations that they'll show. They'll do all those things to give the officials a heads up on something, a wrinkle of some sort. The problem I think we had was this guy, number 70, had continued to come in the game and let the official know tackle eligible. And I think what happened was that official just saw him come up to him and say, I'm eligible. And he just probably nodded his head, not thinking it's 68 that's supposed to be eligible, not 70. So there was some miscommunication on who was supposed to say what. And all of a sudden you have two guys going to him and saying, all right, I'm eligible, which is you can't do that. And what they should have done is call the official timeout right there on the spot and say, hey, you got too many guys that are eligible. Or you play in like they did, say, well, they had an illegal receiver downfield.
But if everybody did it the right way and the officials knew about it, they got to get together and they have to pick up the flag on that too. That's they need to go back. They can go back and they can look at that. I mean, there's a lot of video evidence out there that 68 walked up to the official.
Yeah,
and there's the options there to overturn this stuff and look at this.
You know what? You're right, Joe. The technology today allows them to make fix a mistake. And I think most people would say, I just want you to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the opportunity to do so, but you elected not to. And now Detroit finds themselves where they can be no higher than a 3 seed. And there's a big difference in that, especially for a team who has no playoff experience.
Right.
So, it's a mess that I wish the NFL would acknowledge. I know Adam Schefter said that this crew would be downgraded because this isn't their only mistake during the course of the year, apparently. But, if you look up and down, all of these crews are going to make mistakes. Yeah. I just think, as you mentioned, because this was the only game in town that everybody saw the same mistake.
When you say downgraded, that means as I look ahead at the Week 18 schedule, I assume that they might be playing in they might be officiating the Jets-Patriots game. That's
probably a good place for them.
That's the only game on the schedule with two losing teams going head-to-head in Week 18. Outside of that, the NFL got a lot of what they wanted, and the primetime game being Bills-Dolphins. The Bills just kept scrapping until they got their way up into a point, and the Dolphins helped them out too with some of their blunders over the past few weeks. Yeah. Dolphins, though, you know what? They had a rough schedule to end the season, but the NFL gets their primetime game they probably wanted, looking at back at the schedule 3-4 weeks ago.
The unfortunate thing here is that they lose Chubb, one of their better players defensively, so they're going to be a little light against Buffalo. And I kind of tip my cap to the Bills, who, they were on the campus. They were taking a standing 8 count. Okay. And I think a lot of people thought that they were done. McDermott was under fire for some things he said, and they had some players who weren't happy because they weren't getting the ball, and you had some injuries. But, man, they are right back in it, and I would not want to open up the playoffs against them.
No.
That's one team I'm like, nah, we're good. I just think I'd move on to something else. But,
especially if they win this game and win the AFC East and get that first game at home,
mm-hmm.
You're telling – I mean, going to Buffalo in January is not where you want to be.
I don't really want to go there in July. But you're right about
you go there that 1 week they have a summer. That's you get there for that, and it's a pretty nice week if you go there.
This was a few years ago when I was doing Rams sideline for exhibition games. We played Buffalo, and it was the best weekend of weather they've ever had, according to the people who live there. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is like it's like August. And the guy was like, no, you don't understand. We don't have. It was balmy to them, and I'm like, okay. And people really want to live here. I don't know why. I mean, it sounds like an interesting place, but not one for me. But one of the things about the schedule, and you and I've talked about this time every year. The NFL has found a way to make the final week of the season interesting. And I always say this: you never bet first and last weekends of the NFL because there's just too many things that can go wrong. We may look a certain way on paper, man, but all of a sudden somebody pulls one out of their ass or whatever, and you have a fight on your hands, and somebody's going to get knocked out of the playoffs, and somebody's going to fall into the playoffs for all the wrong reasons. So, but this weekend, we're going to have that same thing. Pittsburgh having to beat Baltimore to get in. I think that's going to be a scuffle right there. So if you're Baltimore, do you even play Lamar? Because you have nothing to lose.
And this is where you come in, where they have the number 1 seed overall. Do you want to give Lamar Jackson 2 whole weeks off, or do you worry what he's going to look like when he comes back?
I'd rather for him to be rested and ready. I'll dress him out, but maybe I'd treat him like it's an exhibition game where maybe he takes 1 series or 2 series. But I'll tell you this, my backup quarterback's going to get a lot of work and practice this week.
Yeah, that's what I would say with that is you start him, you let him play the first quarter, you just let him get his feet wet and warm up, and then you say, all right, now you can go sit down.
But here's the thing that you have the professional competitive situation where you expect them to put their best effort on the field. The bettors certainly feel that way. The opposition feels that way. Teams that are trying to get in the playoffs want you to play your best players. So you have that little raise of the eyebrow, and really more for the bettors. I don't think the league really cares, but the bettors do, and the league is responsible to the bettors. They may not want to admit it, but the gamblers own this league. They own this league.
Other big matchups this weekend too. That Saturday, you mentioned the Steelers, Ravens, also Texans, Colts. Who would have thought that would have been as big of a game in Week 18 when you at the start of the season? Those are 2 teams I think surprised a lot of people with just how competitive they've been all season long.
A lot of fight in both of those teams, and remember, you would have had 2 rookie quarterbacks, but their quarterback Richardson went down with an injury. His season was over. But C.J. Stroud has been banged up a little bit, but man, he's really played well. Is he the rookie of the year in the NFL?
Over the wide receiver from the Rams?
Yeah.
I think if he leads a team to the playoffs, then yeah.
Okay.
I think so. I think if he leads his team to the playoffs, then yeah. But the is it Piku, the wide receiver for the Rams? It's setting all kinds of rookie records for receiving there. I mean, he's got to be in the conversation too.
Yeah.
For that. So, big Week 18 in the NFL for that. Are you and Howard doing a show this week, previewing the national championship game?
There's a very good chance that Howard and I will chop it up on Thursday.
All right. What else do we have to look forward to this week?
Well, I hope we're going to be able to talk about some baseball at some point later this week. As the holidays are behind us. Spring training is just around the corner, and there's still a lot of good players that are out there looking for work. But I think we'll see things expedited a little bit more because the bottom line is this: there are teams who know what they need. The market has been set to a point. Go do it before somebody else slips in and makes this thing even more interesting. And you don't need that sort of intrigue at this point.
In regards to MLB offseason, 24 teams have added a free agent so far. This for their big league roster. 5 other teams have added a big leaguer via trade. There is 1 team that has not signed a big league talent or made a trade yet. Do you know which team that is?
Chicago Cubs.
Yes. What are they doing? You go out and you spend $40 million on a new manager, and all you've done is lost players.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. But they may see. I expect them to come out swinging this week. I really do, because they don't have a first baseman, they don't have a third baseman, they don't have a starting rotation. I mean, they've got some real holes to fill, and there's only a handful of players out there that can help make them better.
Yeah, one of them was on their team last year in Bellinger.
Yeah, and you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if they make another run at him. I think in Bellinger's case, is he looking for long term, or does he want to bet on himself again?
Yeah.
And maybe do a short-term deal. So I just think that everybody's kind of in that holding pattern on what's the right length of a deal.
And outside of that too, I was talking to somebody over the weekend about the Brewers being another, running away with the division again this year. And I've
not
said,
a chance.
What did the Brewers do this offseason?
Not a chance.
All the Brewers have done so far is they've lost Brandon Woodruff to injury.
I'm going to make this prediction, and I don't have to go out on a limb. The Brewers are finished behind the Cardinals this year.
Yeah, the Cardinals have done the most in the NL Central to improve themselves. The Reds haven't done anything. After the season the Reds had last year, what have they done so far this offseason?
They made one acquisition recently. Was it Montas they signed?
You're right. Yeah, they did. They did go out and get a starting pitcher. The Pirates, they re-signed McCutchen for his farewell season. Yeah. And so the NL Central has done really nothing.
So
meanwhile, in the AL Central, by the way, are the Royals the Royals have a chance at winning the AL Central next year?
Apparently, they think they do. And you know what? Here's the thing: when you look at that division, I mean,
It's bad.
Cleveland. Yeah, Cleveland is there. Detroit's trying to figure it out. There's a lot of teams that are right on the cusp of trying to break through.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make them, a powerhouse. I love the way baseball's setting up, where there's a lot of teams that have a chance.
Yeah.
There's a lot of teams that have a legitimate chance to get in. Now, what happens after that, who knows? But I'm glad to see teams that are being more proactive compared to just saying wait until next year.
You once again will be back on KMOX this week. The Hot Stove Show, Wednesdays or Thursdays? What day of the week is that? Thursdays with the Hot Stove Show. What do you guys have this week on that?
Ricky Horton is our guest, and we'll have him on, and we have a few other interviews that we'll conduct during the course of the week with Ricky Horton. And we changed the format a little bit this year, where we'll have somebody come in, and what we do, we do the show from Ballpark Village, and we do it around lunchtime, so people can come by and talk baseball with us while we're there. And what we do is just kind of chew it up as far as what's going on with the team, what's going on around the game, and obviously what to expect, from baseball as a whole. So that's what we'll do a little bit more of that. And it's more of a long form sit down compared to the normal 5 to 8 minute chat.
Very nice. Claibs, that's going to do it for our show today. You and I will be back next week out at Munganess. And if any Cardinal news breaks, Rammer and I will come your way with that. Hopefully we get a football. You and Howard are able to sit down and do some football talk. And then Rock and Rammer with some NBA talk, college hoops talk as well later on this week. All kinds of stuff coming your way here on Claibs Online. Until then, he is Mike Claiborne. I'm Joe Roderick. This has been the Ameren Illinois Lunch Show, powered by Gray Bar, driven by Munganess St. Louis Acura, right here on ClaibsOnline.com.
There's always been a bright side to living in downstate Illinois. Ameren, Illinois is making it even brighter with a little help from the sun. Right now, we're building a next-generation solar facility to bring you cleaner energy for generations to come. It's good for the environment, your neighborhood, and everyone living in downstate Illinois. That's brighter thinking. That's energy at work. Learn how you can participate in solar programs at amerenillinois.com/renewables.